So, what if I told you that you could be a global real estate mogul, but without ever having to fix a leaky faucet or chase down a late rent check? It sounds a little too good to be true, right? Well, today we're going to dive into an investment strategy that looks a whole lot like that. We're going to deconstruct the portfolio of WP Carey, a company that has pretty much perfected the art of being the lazy landlord.
Just think about that for a second. On the surface, it sounds totally random. A school somewhere in Europe and a giant warehouse down in Texas. I mean, what could those two things possibly have in common? Turns out, that weird connection is the absolute secret to their entire business model. So that's the big question we're going to answer today. How does this kind of scattered-looking portfolio create such a stable, hands-off income stream? Well, the answer really lies in two key ingredients that, when you put them together, create this incredibly powerful and resilient investment machine. Okay, let's get into the first piece of the puzzle. It all starts with a special type of contract, a kind of secret weapon for landlords. It's called the triple net lease, and trust me, this is not your typical rental agreement. It completely changes the game and the whole relationship between the owner and the tenant.
So, what on earth is a triple net lease? You'll hear people call it NNN for short. Basically, the tenant agrees to pay for the three nets, that's property taxes, the building insurance, and all the maintenance. And when I say all maintenance, I mean everything, from changing a light bulb to fixing the roof. This just fundamentally changes the landlord's job. And this really shows you the night and day difference. On one side, you have the traditional landlord, right? They're juggling taxes, insurance, surprise repairs, all those day-to-day headaches. And then, over on the other side, you've got the NNN landlord, who's basically just outsourced all of those problems directly to the person using the building. Which brings us to this. Once that lease is signed, the landlord's to-do list gets, well, incredibly short. The whole NNN model transforms owning a building into something that feels a lot more like owning a bond. You just get this predictable stream of income without any of the operational headaches. But look, that triple net lease, as cool as it is only half the story. The real genius here is how WP Carey uses that lease across a massive, intentionally varied portfolio. This is where their master strategy, diversification, really comes into play. You see, they don't just put all their eggs in one basket. They've built this incredible fortress of diversification with 4 layers of protection. They spread their risk across different countries, hundreds of different tenants, a whole bunch of different industries, and all sorts of property types. It's like a financial shock absorber. And here's a great snapshot of how that works. You can see they're heavily invested in industrial and warehouse space. And that makes sense, right? With all of us clicking buy now online, that whole industry is booming. But they're also in office, retail, and self-storage, which means if one sector has a bad year, it doesn't sink the whole ship. Okay, so the strategy sounds pretty smart on paper, but does it actually work? Does it make money? Let's take a look at how this combo of NNN leases and radical diversification actually performs in the real world. And here is the proof in the pudding. WP Carey has increased its dividend to its shareholders for over 20 years in a row. That kind of crazy consistency is what gets you the fancy title of dividend aristocrat. And for anyone who loves getting that regular income check, a track record like this is, well, it's about as good as it gets.
Now, here's another key number that explains why they're so stable. The average lease in their portfolio is over a decade long. Just let that sink in for a minute. They have their revenue streams contractually locked in for 10 plus years into the future. That gives them a level of predictability that is just almost unheard of. Of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. No investment is ever risk-free. And this model, for all its strengths, has its own trade-offs. So it's really important we take a second to read the fine print. This lays it out pretty clearly. The pros are huge. You get that predictable cash flow, super low expenses, and even built-in protection from inflation. But the cons are just as real. The landlord doesn't get a huge payday if the property's value suddenly doubles. And the biggest risk of all, the whole model depends on your tenant's ability to pay their rent. Tenant credit risk is everything here. So after pulling this whole thing apart, what's the big idea? What's the main lesson we can take away from looking at this unique portfolio? Let's boil it all down to one simple, powerful idea. It all comes down to this formula. You take the beautiful simplicity of the triple net lease, you supercharge it with that crazy multi-layered diversification strategy, and the result is a stable, predictable, bond-like income stream. It's a really sophisticated way to get a very passive result. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought.
In a world that feels more volatile and uncertain every single day, there's a pretty strong argument for a strategy that's built on predictability. So you have to wonder, is this lazy approach, focused on stable, long-term contracts, actually one of the smartest ways to navigate whatever's coming next? It's definitely something to think about.